I'm Theo Harvey, and I came to Tulane after graduating from a college school, which was a military school. I was interested in interviewing for the ROTC at Tulane, and I met Commander Wendell. I think he was a lieutenant at that time, and he had known that I'd gone to a military school. See, and I thought we got really well educated in the Navy. The only problem was at that time all the ships were being used to convoy things over to Great Britain. So when we took cruises, we had to go to a non-commissioned airport where they were training pilots. But even though it wasn't commissioned, they were training quite a number of pilots. And we had to take the ground course. And the pilots took us up in those yellow Paros, and they made sure we got sick before we got down. It was something else. But we really did get pretty good training. We did a lot of things, but one of the things we did, I'll never forget, we went on a special mission, and nobody knew what it was. All we knew was we went out somewhere north of Australia, and whatever we were looking for, we didn't find, and we had to go into Australia to get provisions, and of all things, we ran out of coffee. I thought they were going to throw the supply off overboard. And the funny part of it is, in Louisiana, they have little drip pots, and you can make coffee in that, but you make coffee so strong that when you put a spoon in it, you can't see the spoon. And my divisions were all rated men. I mean, I had gunner's mates, fire controlmen, and torpedomen. And they all had workplaces where they could repair things. So when that happened, we didn't go into Australia that quickly because we were a good ways away from them. But we were headed to Australia to pick up supplies. And I brought to one of these workshops, I think it was a gunner's mate, yeah. And I gave him a pot my wife gave me to take, and she shipped me coffee every chance she had, and it was coffee and chicory, French market coffee, the hardest coffee. So anyway, I called him to my stateroom one time, and he came in, and I said, "Look, I have this little coffee pot, and I'm going to give you about 8 pounds of coffee, and I'm going to tell you how to make it, and at least you'll have coffee." So I explained to him how to do it. And that night, I had the mid-watch, and I was standing on the bridge, and the gunner's mates and all the gun crews were changing watches, and I heard him come up and he says, "Good Lord, I didn't sleep a bit. I don't know whether I can stand this watch." They said, "Well, what happened to you?" "Oh," he said, "Mr. Harvey gave me this coffee, and I made it, and he said, I couldn't go to sleep. You could throw it on the bulkhead, and it would take the paint off." And I was standing right over and heard it. So the next day he came back and gave me the coffee and said, "Thank you very much." We really enjoyed it. But anyway, that's my only coffee story. And I just had a call from a friend of mine who was a civil judge, a circuit judge in California, and he was here for some kind of meeting, and he called me about 5 o'clock, and he said, "You know, I remembered you lived in New Orleans, but too late because we're leaving tomorrow morning." I said, "Wait a minute, you have to go to dinner, don't you?" He said, "Certainly." Well, at that time I belonged to the Plimsoll Club, and you could call the Plimsoll Club at any time, and you'd go up there, the dining room was open all the time. So I said, my wife and I are going to pick you and your wife up from the hotel, and we're going to go to the Plimsoll Club. We went up there and had a wonderful dinner, and you know, you could look all over New Orleans, and it was really very nice. Of course, we were the only people there, but then as we were leaving, he said, "You know, we did get the presidential citation I said, no, I didn't know anything about that. He said, well, we saved our ship. Don't you remember? After everybody gave us up, we fought the fire. We didn't abandon ship like they suggested, because the fire had gone down on the hangar deck, and it was really kind of nasty. But anyway, I said, no, I haven't heard a thing from the Navy. He said, well, I did. I said, well, you probably would first because of your position. But you know, I really have never heard anything from him, and there's no way in the world that you can contact Navy personnel. There is no way. I tell you, the door is shut and it's in the wrong place. Anyway, but the things that, you know, I think we did mostly, like at Iwo Jima, we got really some of the best duties because our captain was a chief test pilot, and he was a captain, and we knew he was going up to admiral very shortly, and he was a daredevil. He really was. Like one time we were in Guam, and I had the deck, and he said, and we were against the dock, and he said, call off my Jeep and my driver. He says, I'm going over to the air base. They have an Army P-51, which is that gold plane. He said, I've never flown one. And he said, when you get off watch, go up the flight deck. I'm going to come over the flight deck. And you're not even supposed to fly anything under 500 feet. Well, he did. And I went up and watched him. He came over and he just waved to me. And all of a sudden, all the radios in Guam started flickering. But, you know, he didn't care. He was something else. And when he came back, he said, that's a wonderful plane. And I said, you've never even seen one before? He said, no. He said, I've always wanted to fly one. He was a fantastic guy. But I think we really got preferential treatment many times. Like at one time when toward the end of the war, before we got damaged, we were off Okinawa, and they put an admiral aboard us to study the operation of invading Japan, you know, and we were getting ready to do that. And his aide, we got to know well, and I shouldn't say this, but I had some whiskey in my locker. And so we would bring him down every time they dropped him off, and we would find out what was going on. Because, you know, he'd take him to stride and brief the admiral, and that was it. Well, he told us about the invasion of Japan. And I'll tell you, we had a few more drinks after that. I mean, they predicted we would lose 1 million men. And he told us how well prepared the island of Japan was. And it just blew our minds. He said, and that's why they think we're going to lose 1 million, but we're going. And right after that, they dropped the atomic bomb, fortunately. Anyway, at Iwo Jima, we got the duty to fly planes in. They all had grids where the Marines were going, you know, the Marines did. And they'd fly over the Marines and get commands from the Marines where they wanted naval gunfire. And our planes would send it back to the ships that were lined up firing at the Iwo Jima. And then the other thing was that if they had some spots where they needed strafing, then the planes would go down and strafe that area for them and so on. But that was, you know, that was pretty good duty. It was nice. And besides, I could go to CIC and listen to it. It was like, you know, like television. You could see where the planes were and everything. It was really nice. And that was, I think that was considered pretty good duty. But we were with the 3rd Fleet when they went up north of Hokkaido and surprised the Japanese. That's the first time the Navy hit Japan. And we went down on Japan, and it was a really successful operation. So the first thing they did, the fighter planes went down and strafed all the planes on the ground and so on. So they didn't have much coming up after us. And then we had the planes returning, but we had other planes going in to make sure that they were safe. So that was good duty too. And then at Okinawa, we did a lot there. And then we were with Halsey's 3rd Fleet at Luzon protecting MacArthur's landing. And then Halsey got wind of the part of the Japanese fleet just north of him. So he told MacArthur he was going to intercept them. And so we went north, and that's when we got one of the worst typhoon ever recorded. We had 92-foot waves in it. And we had, you know, we were 4 carriers and 4 DEs. And I saw one of the DEs go bottom up. And the Navy will never tell you how many ships were lost.
Wow.
But it was unbelievable. And we were in it for 2.5 days. We couldn't get out of it. And the only thing that saved us, all those things, there's such a thing as a typhoon track. And it's told in Bowden, the navigation book. Do you all still use that? No, you don't use that anymore, yes. I don't think. No. But it's on the first page because there was a man, boy, he was 13 years old, somewhere in Massachusetts. He was an absolute genius. And he's the one that did the Bowditch book.
Wow.
And he, to prove it, he went sailing, you know, to make sure everything was right. And he ran into a typhoon. And he said, when you get in the Pacific, beware of the typhoon track because it is 10 times stronger than any hurricane. But of course, this was an exception. One barometer went down to 26 in that storm. That's pretty strong, isn't
That
it?
is very strong.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
I know it, I know. Well, you couldn't believe it. I mean, you're just awestruck because the ship would do this, it would do that, and it would go up, and the stern would come out with the propellers on a big ship.
On the carriers?
Yes.
Oh.
And some of the carriers lost their flight decks, it just collapsed, and there's so much damage. When we got back to Ulithi, and that's where it was a big staging area, we went in there, and you know, you always hear the scuttlebutt, but the scuttlebutt was that we lost more ships in Typhoon Halsey than we lost to the Japanese in the whole war.
Wow.
And then they won't say how many were sunk. They say we lost 20-some-odd hundred men, but they don't give you anything on the ships.
Wow.
But I mean, it was really, well, the destroyers we had with us, they kept saying, help us, we're taking water in the stacks and it's going to knock out our generators. But what could we do? I mean, we had a hard enough time ourselves. But what we did finally, I don't know whether it was one of the other ships or somebody advised us to take it on the stern because it was such a sail area exposed to it. But I don't think it would have made much difference. But anyhow, we did that. And to come about in a storm like that, we did it once and the wave knocked us back. We did it twice. Finally, the 3rd time we got around. And then that's how we took it on the stern. And the storm went up almost to Luzon, and then it goes north, and it spit us out. And that's the only thing that saved us. We were at Okinawa, and right off Okinawa. And our planes were attacking Okinawa mostly. And the problem was that the Essex got hit, and it was in flames, and it called over to us and said they had one pilot that won't ditch by a destroyer to be picked up. And we figured he must be wounded or something. But anyway, we agreed to take him. And the first pass he came in so fast, like he was going to land on a big, big carrier, and he got waved off. So, and the landing signal officer indicated to him what speed he should come in. Told him that he can't bring him in if he comes in any faster than that. Well, the guy circled around and came in again as fast as he did the first and cut his engines. And the worst part of it was we were disarming all our planes on the flight deck behind the crash barrier. He grabbed a wire and stretched it and kept going and went through the crash barrier into all those men. And some of them pushing planes, however position they went, they would just burn like that. We lost, I don't know, it's 20 some odd men like that. Anyway, and of course, high octane gas blew up in the bombs. And I was on the bridge with the captain at the time. And we even lost steerage control. We never did figure out why we lost that. But anyway, you know, it was just a real catastrophe. And as a matter of fact, I think the Navy doesn't want to talk about it because, in essence, I think the captain that I tell you is so good, he probably never should have agreed to that, especially since we hadn't gotten a flight deck secured, you know. And I just wonder whether that's why the Navy's keeping it so quiet. You know, you never know. See, after we got hit with that plane and everything exploded, we had two cruisers come alongside of us. One of them was a WWII, because I could see it on the side where I was. I don't know what the other one was, but they were pumping water on us, and it helped. But then all of a sudden, more things exploded, and you know, it got worse. And when it got down to the hangar deck, they said, "Look, we can't risk any more of our ship, so we're going to have to cast off." And they said it's gotten under control. It's not under control. And he said that you should abandon ship while we're here, and we can pick up survivors. But the executive officer decided no, we were going to fight. But he was a Annapolis graduate, and I'll tell you, he was brave, because I could see him up from where I was running around the flight deck like a hydrant didn't work. Boy, he'd grab an axe and hit that thing and get it moving again, and organize crews and so on. And he really did a wonderful job. But what we saved was just a shell. And then when, for some reason, we couldn't make more than 8 knots, so it affected the engine rooms too. And so the Franklin was terrible. Franklin was ready to launch planes when they dropped bomb right on. And so they couldn't make more than 8 knots. So they've sent us with the Franklin and a destroyer, 2 destroyers and a cruiser to get us out of the war zone. And then they just let us go the rest of the way. But that's how we got back to the United States. And I know we made a lot of enemies in the war because of the things that we got. Like when we first went into service, we were going up to the Philippines. We were going to be in the turkey hunt. And one of our ships got engine trouble. So they sent us to Manus, and they sent somebody else to take our place. And all those CVs, they got mad as hell at us. They thought we were copping out or something, I don't know what. But, and then having the captain we had, they didn't like that. We got too much preferential treatment, you know. We really did. But he was good. He was really, and he went right out from there to be an admiral, and I think he got to be the head of the aeronautical department in the Navy. But everybody knew him. He and another guy named Suchek were the two, I think there were only 2 Navy test pilots. And Suchek had already made admiral, and so Gwynn was ready to go there. Anyway,
I don't think
it was amazing that the ship, well, it was torn up because even on the hangar deck, a lot of the welds were gone, and you could see daylight out through. You know, every time one of those waves hit, every plate in that ship buckled and popped. And boy, it would go right through you, I'll tell you. I mean, honestly, everybody thought they were gone. They really did. It was one storm. And as I said, they've never recorded a storm like that. I mean, even with the average storm that they get, it's 10 times stronger than a hurricane. But to get one like that. There's never been one recorded like that.
Like in the
The
Navy.
thing that, I guess, the best news we got was because we'd heard all this stuff about going into Japan. It was when they dropped that atomic bomb. Oh, God. I mean, they all said Truman was such a weak president, but it took a lot of strength to do what he did. Well, I mean, it was just incredible to see the difference all of a sudden. And it just happened right after that. And then when they dropped the second one, we knew that was it. They couldn't take that. So, but the Navy was good up until that storm. It never should have happened, though. That's the terrible thing. I mean, well, they didn't have the stations around, but Halsey was so intent in getting after the Japanese. Nobody could take on fuel. Every fuel line would pop, or the two ships would come together. I mean, we took on some, and our captain said, "That's enough. We have a lot of fuel anyway." Well, we didn't know how bad that storm was going to be, but we had them cast off because the lines kept breaking, and Halsey wanted everybody to get enough fuel, and he never did really, but because he was still intent on going after the Japanese fleet. That's one thing that was good about him. He was a real warrior. He really was. So, actually, I was thinking about staying in the Navy, but after getting out of the Navy and the experiences we had, I said, no, I think I'll join my father's firm.